This is the Crimson Corner with Bill Riley.
Walks it into the end zone for a Utah touchdown.
Your source for the best insight on everything happening in and around Utah athletics. Now, here's the host of the Crimson Corner, the voice of the Utes, Bill Riley.
Welcome into this week's edition of the Crimson Corner podcast. I'm Bill Riley, the play-by-play voice of the University of Utah. Our podcast today is brought to you by our friends at Advanced Window Products. That would be the mayor of Sac Lake City, Nate Orchard's squad. Yep, they do a great job. They've taken good care of me over the years. If you need windows, if you need window treatments, if you need any of that stuff, let the good folks at Advanced Window Products take good care of you. Got a good show lined up for you today. We'll do a recap of the weekend that was with Utah football and the big noon kickoff and all that good stuff. A look ahead to the first ever trip and regular season matchup with West Virginia. Utah and West Virginia have only played twice ever, and they were in the postseason and bowl games. Tony Caridi, the longtime voice of the Mountaineers, 42 years, I believe, is the voice of the Mountaineers, will join us to give us a little sneak peek on Rich Rod's team, and then we'll take a swing around campus. Basketball is underway. Volleyball, soccer have big weeks, so got all that stuff coming up here on the Crimson Corner podcast with me, Bill Riley. It was a tough Saturday. We're not going to lie about this. It was a tough Saturday for Utah football. Now, they fall 34-10 to Texas Tech. Most of you know that. Everything leading up to it, though, was awesome. The build-up, the week that was, the big noon kickoff, the pregame, the campers, the people being out all night long. It was a great showing. It really was. We knew coming in it would be a great football game. I will say it was a competitive football game for three quarters. It wasn't a great football game for either team, unless you're a Tech fan in the fourth quarter. We'll get to that. But Fox was there. The big noon kickoff was there. They were in town setting up all week long. The shows came from the Smith's tailgate area, the views of the tailgating and in campus and all the social media interaction. It was unreal. We didn't do our pregame show out in the Smith's tailgate tent like we usually do on the radio side of things because, well, frankly, it was a zoo. And nobody would have cared that the three of us were out there doing our pregame show, not with Dave Portnoy and Urban Meyer and Rob Stone and Matt Leinart and Brady Quinn and I think Mark Ingram. They were all out there, but it was great. And the Utah fans that turned out, whether they were students, whether they were fans, it looked amazing. And frankly, the feedback that the Fox folks gave the Utah folks was, you guys were about as good as it gets. You guys leaned into this. Your fans, your support, your people. It was a home run. It was a great 2-hour advertisement for Utah football, for Utah athletics, for the University of Utah, for Salt Lake City, all of it. It was fantastic. But sometimes this tends to happen. The buildup is there, and then maybe the game doesn't live up to the hype or the expectation. We knew it was two good teams squaring off. The rankings said that coming in. Utah was 16, and Texas Tech was number 17. But it wasn't a pretty football game. It just really wasn't. It was really a defensive struggle and kind of a slugfest for three quarters. Missed opportunities by both teams, but Utah really missed some opportunities. The offense just never really found a rhythm. They couldn't run it effectively, and with this Utah football team, if they're not able to run it effectively up front, they're going to struggle just a little bit. Devin Dampier wasn't quite 100%, and you could see that a little bit. The area where I thought the game really changed or could have changed for the positive for Utah was the 69-yard touchdown pass. Dampier scrambles around. He finds Jackson Benny behind the defense. Benny turns on the Jets. He's in the end zone. I had an unbelievable touchdown call. And then it got called back. Unfortunately, there was a penalty on an offensive lineman. Spencer Fano was downfield a little bit. We talked to him in the postgame show. Spencer took responsibility for it. He was a stand-up guy about it. But you just have to wonder, how different is it if that touchdown counts and it's 7-7 in the first quarter and momentum is on Utah's side and they're not playing from behind? The one thing I wondered coming into the game, and we talked about this, Scott Mitchell, Stevenson, Sylvester, and I, we talked about this on the pregame show. Utah hadn't had to play from behind all year long. They hadn't really faced any offensive adversity. They had moved the ball, even in the Wyoming game. They missed some field goals, but they moved the ball up and down the field. What would happen when they faced a little bit of adversity, and they did against Texas Tech? That's because Texas Tech is good. We'll get to the Red Raiders coming up here in a minute. That penalty taking the touchdown off the board was huge. And then the offense just never really functioned the way we've seen it function all year long. There were some other missed shots down the field, a couple of key fumbles in the first half. Now, thankfully, the Utah defense stood up and really kept Texas Tech kind of at arm's length. And then there were the 2 interceptions as well. Utah was -2 on the day in turnovers. They fumbled it twice through 2 picks. Now, they got 2 picks of their own. But really, it was not a good day for the offense. The defense played mostly well for 3 quarters, but I think you could see it if you watched the game or you were in the stadium. They were just gassed in the fourth quarter. And after Utah got it to 13-10, you're thinking, okay, we might have a ball game here. Then Texas puts in back-to-back scores, and really that was that. Credit the Red Raiders. They're good. They're a good team. My 3 takeaways from the game are pretty simple. Texas Tech is good. They are physical. We heard all the stories in the offseason and in the week leading up to it, how they invested anywhere from $25 to $55 million in their football team. Well, I can tell you, and you probably can too if you watch the game, they invested well. Those guys up front, it's not very often, and I could probably count on one hand my time here covering the University of Utah, especially in the Whittingham era, where Utah was not able to be physical up front, where they could not get a push. And the offensive line, they pass protected fine. I didn't think they had 1 sack on Devin Dampier. Devin moved around pretty well, but when Utah's at its best, they're getting that push up front. And Texas Tech, those 4 defensive linemen that they all bought from other schools, they were good. And they basically held Utah at bay. Utah really wasn't able to run the football. Kyle Whittingham said, yeah, our numbers look slightly better because we got some garbage time yards at the end of the game. But to me, Texas Tech is really good, and they invested well in that defensive line and in their playmakers. They had some good playmakers, and to be fair, their backup quarterback, he looked better than their starting quarterback. Will Hammond looked terrific. Utah knocked Baron Morton out of the game. He took some real shots in that game, and he didn't play most all of the second half. Will Hammond didn't flinch. He came in, he used his legs against the Utah defense. He made some great passes, and those playmakers made plays. My second takeaway, and I kind of have alluded to this a little bit, but if Utah can't run the football right now, the offense looks a little stuck. You have to be able to make plays down the field, and Utah wasn't able to. They weren't able to establish the line of scrimmage and run the football because what Utah likes to do is set their pass game up off their run game. And the run game was non-existent. Texas Tech came up to the line of scrimmage. They rushed 4 guys. They had their linebackers there, and they just dared Utah to try to make plays behind them, and Utah couldn't do it. So Utah's going to have to now. The good news is they're probably not going to face anybody as physical as that the rest of this year, but they're going to have to find a way to make some plays through the air. And my third takeaway from the game is Utah's not going to play a better team in the regular season. They're going to play good teams. West Virginia this weekend will be tough in Morgantown. Arizona State's still very good. They'll be in Salt Lake City in 3 weeks. BYU's going to be tough in Provo. Kansas could be tough at the end of the year. But I don't know that there's a better team right now in the Big 12 than Texas Tech. I've watched Iowa State play, and Iowa State is good. Utah doesn't have to play them. I've watched Baylor play. Utah will have to play in Waco in November, and Baylor's pretty good. TCU looks good, too. They've only played a couple of games, but they look good. But Utah doesn't have to play TCU in the regular season either. But I'm not sure that I've seen anybody, and I've watched everybody in the Big 12 play this year, I'm not sure that I've seen anybody that has that combination of athleticism and physicality that Texas Tech has. Because Texas Tech is very good up front, but they've also got guys that are athletic defensively and offensively. They've got the playmakers, running backs, tight ends, wide receivers, and they've got that side-to-side defense, those linebackers that play well behind that defensive line. So those are my 3 takeaways. And I've said this before, and I said it on the broadcast Saturday, and I'll say it again. It's early in the season. If you're going to have a game like Utah had on Saturday, it's best to have it early in the season. I equate it a lot to being in school. You know, you get into college, you're not quite sure how tough it's going to be when you get to college, and you have that first exam of the semester, and you don't do very well. You thought you were prepared for it, but you weren't quite prepared for it. You got a bad grade on it, but you know what? It's early in the semester. You still have your midterms. You still have your final. You can raise that grade, and that's how I feel about Utah. Not the defense so much, but the offense. They'll have a chance to evolve here, and they'll have a chance to get better. They'll use the bye week coming up after West Virginia to heal up and improve. But they've got to take care of business this weekend at West Virginia. But I don't think the sky is falling by any means. Two things come out of this. Utah's got to get to be a little bit better on the offensive side of the football. And Texas Tech is really good, and they might be the best team in the Big 12 Conference. My game ball for Saturday's game, I'm going to give it to Jackson Benny. There were a lot of guys. John Henry Daly was terrific up front, too. Dallin Bentley was really good. Ryan Davis had another 10-catch day. But for me, Jackson Benny, because he's playing both ways, he really had a touchdown wiped off the board, which would have been a touchdown and an interception. He's the first Ute to have interceptions in 3 straight games since Clark Phillips did it back in 2022. And I just think he's playing a terrific secondary right now. He had a tackle for loss on it as well. He's getting better and better. And you got to remember, this is a kid that was a walk-on. This was not a kid that came to Utah as a highly touted scholarship player, but he's playing himself into that role right now. So my game ball for the weekend goes to Jackson Benny, but I will give some kudos to John Henry Daly. John Henry Daly leads the nation in sacks, and he's second in the nation in tackles for loss. That's pretty good. The young man that transferred in from BYU a couple of years ago has become a wrecking crew force. And that defense, that offensive line that he played against Texas Tech, 2 6'8" tackles with long wingspans. John Henry Daly was able to get around those guys and do a really, really good job pressuring the quarterback. He got a strip sack. Again, he's second of the year. So those are my thoughts on the game. We'll see what West Virginia poses this week. We've got the Mountaineers coming up on Saturday, 1:30 Mountain Time kickoff. We'll have the radio broadcast for you coming up with pregame beginning at 9:30 a.m. on the flagship radio home, ESPN 700. But West Virginia got beat last weekend by Kansas on the road 41-10. Their best running back, who was a preseason all Big 12 running back, is out for the year. Their best wide receiver, who was a playmaker extraordinaire for them last year and early in the year this year, he's out for the year. And they've played 5 different quarterbacks already this year. So I'm just going to say that I think West Virginia is still trying to find itself a little bit. A lot of teams are. There's only 4 games into the season. We haven't even hit October yet. But West Virginia, maybe more than others, maybe still trying to find themselves just a little bit right now. We get to see our old friend Rich Rodriguez again. Rich Rod! Utah and Kyle Whittingham have played Rich Rod down through the years 7 times. 6 of them at at Arizona, and 1 time at Michigan. Kyle beat him in 2008 when he was the head coach at Michigan. That was the end of the Rich Rod run there. Then Rich Rod beat Kyle 4 consecutive times when he was at Arizona. The first 4 times Utah and Arizona met when Rich Rod was down there, they beat him. Then Kyle beat him the last 2 times he was at Arizona before he got let go. He's an original. His original coaching kind of legacy began at West Virginia. He's a West Virginia guy through and through. He used to have guys like Steve Slayton and Pat White when he was there early on. Those guys were really, really good. I don't know that he has him quite where he wants to be. You know, when Rich Rod's really good, he's going to run it down your throat, and he usually is a mobile quarterback. I remember some of those teams in Arizona he had were so good at running the football. So it'll be Rich Rodriguez. Kyle's 3-4 against him all time, and we'll see what they can do. They gave up 41 points to a mobile quarterback and a pretty good offense in Kansas last weekend on the road in Lawrence. But I hear Milan Puskar Stadium in Morgantown is a great atmosphere. I'm looking forward to it. I've only been to Morgantown once. I was there for basketball earlier this year. So I'm looking forward to my trip back and getting back to it and checking off another stadium. Know a lot of Utah fans are going, staying in Pittsburgh, driving down. We're going to be in Clarksburg and driving over, but it should be fun. And we'll get an idea of where Utah is as they try to bounce back against West Virginia, then into the bye week. We'll get a full rundown on the West Virginia Mountaineers coming up in the next segment here on the Crimson Quarter podcast with Tony Caridi. He's the longtime play-by-play voice of the Mountaineers. He'll join us coming up next. Stay with us here on Crimson Corner.
Here's another insider interview on the Crimson Corner podcast.
As we continue on this week's Crimson Corner podcast, we're headed to West Virginia this week. I was there for basketball in the spring and my first trip for a football game to Morgantown. We're joined right now by a man that knows the town well because he's been there a long time, the longtime play-by-play voice of the West Virginia Mountaineers. My buddy Tony Caridi with us here on the Crimson Corner. How are you, man?
Bill, I'm wonderful. I appreciate the invitation. Look forward to having you guys in this weekend.
I do too. Tell our listeners how long you've been a part of West Virginia athletics.
Well, this is season 42. I graduated from Syracuse University. I came to Morgantown thinking I would be here for 6 months 42 years ago. And that, they say, is life.
That's a good run right there. 42 years in our business period is a good run, but to be in the same place for 42 years, what was it? What do you like about Morgantown that kept you there? Because you're good at what you do, and those of us that are pretty good at what we do usually have opportunities to go elsewhere. What did you like about Morgantown?
There's a bunch of things. One is WVU wise, people care. You know, we don't have any professional teams in this state. So West Virginia is not only the college team, it's also the professional team. So, you know, the admiration that the pro teams have, like in your market, right? Like the Jazz, like there's just this great affinity. Well, that's also the affinity toward West Virginia. And so there's 55 counties in the state of West Virginia. And in each of those 55 counties, no matter where you are, you will see that flying WV logo around. So everyone cares. That's one thing. Two, it's a really good place to raise a family. We're geographically located pretty well. We're 75 miles south of Pittsburgh. You can get to Washington, D.C. in just a little bit more than 3 hours. You can get to New York in just about 6. You can be in Philly in like 5. So it's really super centrally located. Charlotte, North Carolina, you can make it in 5. And so it's just a really safe, good place to be. It's a true college town. And obviously I met my wife as well. And there are a lot of reasons to stay right here and raise a family.
The sports have been pretty good over the years, too. Coaches you've worked with, Gail Catlett, was that at the beginning of your career?
Yeah, Gail Catlett was here, and in fact, it was Gail Catlett in '98 when we played the Utes in the Sweet 16 in Anaheim, California. If you guys remember that one, I bet you do. That was the great team that you guys had that made it to the Final Four and then the national championship game, right, with Archie Miller and all of those guys. And so that was Gail Catlett. And then after Gail Catlett, we had a great run with John Beeline, who did wonderful things. And we made a couple of runs there, including an Elite 8, and we're one shot away from going to the Final Four. And then Bob Huggins for 16 seasons. We went to the Final Four in 2010. And then, some turmoil here over the last several years. You're familiar with Josh Eilert, who was your interim late last season. Well, Josh was here for a year after Bob Huggins. And then we went Darren DeVries, surprise loss of him to Indiana in the offseason. And now we have Ross Hodge, who I think is really, really going to do a great job here. And we look forward to getting that thing rolling.
I don't know if you remember this, the first time I met you was not necessarily game related, but you came and interviewed and talked to a bunch of folks out here for a documentary on a guy that is a legend in these parts and also a legend in your parts too, one Hot Rod Hundley.
Yeah, it was a fantastic experience. It became a labor of love documentary. I know it was shown a great deal on your regional sports outlet there, and we had great success with it. It won an Emmy, and we just had the time of our lives doing it because when Hot Rod passed, Dan Lohman, who was the producer, had this idea. He said, we really need to do something because Dan lived in Salt Lake for several months in advance of the Olympic Games years ago. And he said, this dude is a legend there. So the whole premise of it was people in Salt Lake knew Hot Rod as a great announcer, and they knew he was a player as well. But people in West Virginia knew Hot Rod as a great player, but really didn't know how great and respected he was as a broadcaster. So if you marry those two together, and then we just had such fortune in getting an unbelievable cast of people to sit down and do interviews with us. I mean, from Jerry Sloan and Frank Layden and Jim Nance and Brent Musburger and Dick Enberg, and I could just go on and on and on. We had A-list guys and ladies that spoke, and it just became a really great thing.
Well, if you guys ever get a chance to see it, it's probably archived somewhere. Is it online or is it on demand or any place?
I think you can still rent it on Amazon, and it's just simply titled Hot Rod.
It's a great watch, especially for people in this area, because so many of us, I knew Rod in a professional manner because I didn't grow up here, but so he was the voice. I always say, Tony, we're oftentimes the soundtrack of people's sporting lives, and Hot Rod was certainly the soundtrack of every Jazz fan's life through the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s.
No, absolutely. I think that people take radio with them wherever they are. And so when you have these great iconic moments, right, it's forever frozen in your mind where you were. And Hot Rod, with all those great teams that he was able to, broadcast the whole run that the Jazz had, I think people will forever, have that in their memory banks of how it felt. And he was cherished and rightfully so.
My buddy Tony Caridi with us. He's the play-by-play voice of the West Virginia Mountaineers. Will be in Morgantown this weekend. I mentioned the basketball coaches, and obviously we talked about Hot Rod. You've been with a number of football coaches. You're on your second go-around with a guy named Rich Rodriguez. How has the return of Rich Rod 2.0, been received in Morgantown?
It's being received extremely well. He was hotter than hot when he left, and he comes back, and it's a movie. I mean, if this thing works, Bill, this thing's going to become a movie. It truly will be, because of the 17 years that he was gone. He had an unbelievable run. His last 3 seasons were 11 wins, and 10 wins, and you were literally one win away, your final game of the regular season, to play for the national championship, and we lost that game. He goes to Michigan. It turns ugly. And then 17 years later, through the Michigan job, the Arizona job, offensive coordinator at Ole Miss, Louisiana Monroe, Jacksonville State, like he describes it as like going through the desert, right? And literally and figuratively going through the desert, and then he makes his way back here. Season tickets exploded. We sold out of season tickets, and people are really excited, and they're hoping that he can once again, have his touch and get this thing back to where it was.
It's the old prodigal son returning home and hoping for a turnaround. I don't know if they got the fatted calf out or not for him, but they'll take wins of any kind. You guys are a couple up and a couple of down right now. So what do we know about the Mountaineers today, Tony, that maybe a month ago we didn't know?
I think, Bill, that you cannot just restart everything and bring in over 80 new players and expect it to be like instant coffee, where you just put the water on and you dump it there and you go, okay, now we have coffee. I think it's harder than that to build a team. And so we brought in 81 new players, maybe a few more. And it's not a rebuild, it's a restart. And so what we're learning is that this is going to be a process. There isn't going to be any instant magic that's going to happen. And as a result of that, it's going to be similar to his first season here back in 2001. He went 3-8 back in the 11 game season era. He went 3-8, and it just took him time to get his guys in. And then once he got his guys in, he had this amazing run. We started with a quarterback by the name of Rasheed Marshall, who was the conference's offensive player of the year. That translates into Pat White, Steve Slayton, name the guys, right? All those guys came in as a result of that, and he just had a run of all runs, and that's what it's going to take here. We're going to have to get, a couple of years and just make some really good acquisitions when it comes to players.
Yeah, you see the outliers that do it quickly, but that doesn't, and we're finding out that doesn't necessarily happen everywhere. Was the final number of new faces that he brought in close to 80?
It was over 80. Okay. So I hesitate. I know it was absolutely 81. I think it's more than 81. We're dressing like 120 plus. So, it's over 80, which is just an absurd number.
The one guy that I think you'd like to have out there that would make you go, that's the established commodities, Jaheim White. I know he got banged up and nicked up. How important is he? Because everywhere Rich Rod's gone, and we remember him at Arizona, his best team's at Arizona, and he beat Utah 4 straight years, his first 4 years there. He had great running attacks. I know Jaheim White's got to be key to that, right?
Yeah, so we lose him week number 2, and he's done for the year. He's already undergone surgery. Same game, we lose Jaden Bray, who was probably going to be number 2, if not number 1, as your wideouts go. He's lost for the year. Second straight year, same type of a foot injury. You lose him. And then we had the Pitt game, which was just a fantastic win for a bunch of different reasons for the program. We had a young guy come in named Ty Edwards, and he goes for a buck 42 and 3 touchdowns, but suffers a hip injury, and so he didn't play last week at Kansas. So you're down your two best running backs, you're down your best receiver, and you're still trying to figure out a bunch of other things. So at this point, you're in complete still learn mode, which is what you don't want to be doing when you're getting ready for week number 5.
Yeah, you don't want to do that at all. Real quick, you mentioned the rivalry game you guys play. We have a pretty big one out here, the Holy War between Utah and BYU. It's a conference game now. Give our listeners an idea of what the backyard brawl means in Morgantown and in Pittsburgh.
Well, it's a 108-year rivalry. It's separated, two schools separated by 75 miles. And there is there's true dislike. I hate to use the word hate, but a lot of people do use the word hate, but there's true dislike. If it's a classic, you could make it on a football field. You could say it's based on socioeconomic terms, where the Pitt people have always looked down at the West Virginia people. The West Virginia folks take great umbrage to that and like nothing better than beating Pitt. And so great hostilities abound in that series, and this year's was the last one we're going to play schedule-wise until 29, so it meant even more. And then Rich's last ever game at West Virginia in run 1 was Pitt, and they beat us 13-9. And this year, we played them on 9-13 in Rich's return. And so you couldn't build a better script for it. West Virginia gets down double figures, fourth quarter. Mountaineers come back, overtime, win it. It was just an absolutely perfect day for the program. But obviously, that's just one game, and everyone knows there's still a ton of work to do.
A couple more minutes here with Tony. What do we need to know about your quarterback position? I know that you got a starter who's played a bunch. Backup came in for a series or so against Kansas, end of the game. But what do we need to know about the quarterback situation heading into this weekend?
It's an unknown. We've played 4 so far. There are 5 available. It wouldn't also, blow my mind if you see the 5th guy. He was injured here in the first couple of weeks. And so the answer to the question is they're not totally sold on what they're doing at quarterback. The offensive line has struggled. The starter, Nico Marchio, is a really good quarterback, a really good thrower, but he is not a mobile quarterback. And when you don't have a good offensive line and you don't have a quarterback that can get out of harm's way, you got a problem. And so Rich has been dabbling with these other quarterbacks who don't throw it as well to see if perhaps he can find the happy medium of a quarterback that could hurt you with his feet. And, when you mentioned his days at Arizona, he had some really good quarterbacks there as well that could move out of the pocket. I think we're still in a state of flux, Bill. I'm not exactly sure going into this week what that combination will be.
Got a lot of Utah fans that are going to be making the trip, flying into Pittsburgh, driving down, spending a couple of days there, spending at least game day Saturday in Morgantown. I like to give folks that haven't been places before a little travel log. I'm not sure anybody in that town outside the Founding Fathers knows more than you. You've been there 42 years, for goodness sake. So what do Utah fans making the trip back east this year need to know about Morgantown and the game day experience at the stadium?
It's a good game day experience. I think fans will be very friendly. You won't be treated like Pitt fans. So I think you'll be fine for your first time. And, West Virginia fans are like this, man. You take care of them, they take care of you. If you start a ruckus, they'll finish the ruckus. That's basically how the whole thing works. But anyway, I think you're coming at a really good time leaf-wise. Our leaves are changing. If you drive around a little bit, if you're going to come in like Thursday-ish or Friday and you have time, there's a place 20 minutes from Morgantown called Cooper's Rock. Cooper's Rock, it's a national forest, and the leaves there and the view from Cooper's Rock are absolutely postcard. Now, you guys, I know you guys have unbelievable views, but with leaves on the trees, you might find these to be interesting. And so Cooper's Rock is a place I would go to. And as I said, it's a classic college town. Just mingle around. Fans will be nice to you. Ask. You'll get answers. You'll get suggestions. It's a good atmosphere. And I think weather-wise, we should be solid again. We've had really good weather. I think you'll just have a really good experience.
Anyway, I would suggest, because I think you or somebody else, Josh Eilert, may have told me to go to Mario's Fishbowl for a couple of pops before a game. Any Tony Caridi restaurant suggestions or a bar suggestions for the Utah fans?
So if you want to do a little bit of a nice meal, Stefano's is a place that does a good job. I would my deal on that kind of stuff is this. I go crowdsource when I go into a new market, and you tip me off to a great Salt Lake restaurant, but I just go like, okay, what's TripAdvisor have? And I just kind of concentrate on 3 or 4, and you're probably not going to miss. But Mario's Fishbowl is a great college atmosphere. If you're young, then you can try, seriously, you can try High Street at night, which is like 9 o'clock and after. But I mean, it's edgy. And so, I mean, it is absolutely a fever pitch of college student life if you want that world. And if you don't want that world, then by all means, stay the heck out of the High Street area. I just think we'll just roam around like the stadium area. In that area, there's restaurants. There's a bunch of stuff to do.
By the way, I turned Tony. Tony's a fan of Italian food, and obviously it comes from the heritage. But I turned you on to what Matteo, didn't I, downtown?
Yes, it was superb. Superb.
So there you go, a little restaurant suggestion in town. A couple of quick thoughts on the way out. Utah in the Big 12, second year in. I know you enjoyed your trip out this way. Tough loss last week, and I think Texas Tech's the best team. But what's your thought on the Utah add to the conference and where things are right now?
Well, a bunch of things. I have great respect for your program and what you guys are and what you guys do. I truly do, and I have from afar for years. And I know that when this all happened and you guys made your move into the Big 12, it was like, what are we doing? And I also completely understand that, because like the first time West Virginia 14 years ago, found ourselves in the middle of the winter out like in Ames, Iowa, I asked myself the same question, like, why are we doing this? What are we doing? But unfortunately, it's the part of the world that we're living in. And I think that, I viewed your facilities on a couple of occasions when we were making the movie, and then this past year we played BYU. Then we came down and we had the extra day at your place and tooled around. I mean, I think you're perfectly suited to do extremely well, in this league. I do think that there's going to be more reorganization in conferences when the next TV deal comes through, which is like 29 and 30. And I think that everyone is probably getting ready and positioning themselves to be on their best and the most attractive when it happens. But I think I'm happy to see you guys in there, even though geographically you just kind of ask yourself, like, are you serious? I mean, we're playing Arizona, and like it just sometimes logistically makes you shake your head.
We're going to be out a day early. We're flying on Thursday because of the 2 time zone swing. So we'll see how that goes. And I'm looking forward. I love going to new broadcast booths and new stadiums and everything for the first time. So I got to experience the Coliseum for basketball, and now I'll get the football stadium. For those that are out there, the proper pronunciation is Milan Pusker.
No, actually, it's Milan, and then just think about pushing a car. Milan Pushkar.
Pushkar. Okay.
Milan Pushkar. He was a great benefactor and created one of the largest generic drug companies in the world right here in Morgantown. And he's since passed, but Milan Pushkar was a great supporter. He's known as Mike, but it's Milan Pushkar.
Milan Pushkar Stadium. And if you get a chance, ride the monorail while you're in Morgantown.
Yes, PRT, Personal Rapid Transit. Yes, indeed.
Tony, thanks for doing this. I look forward to seeing you on Saturday.
Same here, buddy. You take care. Thank you.
Tony Caridi with us on the Crimson Corner. More ahead. Stay with us. My thanks to Tony Caridi, the voice of the Mountaineers, for taking a little time to not just talk a little football with us, but give some of you Utah fans that are making the trip some travel tips of where to eat and where to go when you get to Morgantown. Again, I went there in February, and it was kind of cold, and all the leaves had fallen off the trees. It was a little bleak. But I hear this time of year in northern West Virginia, it is beautiful. So I'm looking forward to the trip and seeing my friend Tony and seeing a Utah-West Virginia matchup coming up at 1:30 on Saturday. We're not that far away from the beginning of the basketball season, right? Men's and women's basketball teams began practice this week at the University of Utah. Now, the running Utes got some bad news. Their big man, one of their transfers in from Western Kentucky, suffered a season-ending injury, which hurts. Babacar Faye was supposed to be kind of the rim protector and the big man for Alex Jensen this year. And so that front court's going to take a little bit of a hit. Baba, as they like to call him, was a guy that played at Western Kentucky and had overcome an injury that he suffered in the second half of last year, but he suffered a season-ending injury in practice this week and will be out for the season. So Alex and his staff are going to have to find some rim protection elsewhere. But we'll see how that plays. The exhibition, by the way, coming up for Utah basketball, your first chance to get a look at the new run in Utes is October the 17th. They'll be hosting Nevada at the Huntsman Center. Steve Alford and Nevada will be coming in, and it will be open, and you can come in. And if you can't make it up that particular day, we're going to carry the broadcast on ESPN+. Myself and Sean Mooney will be doing that one. So mark that on your calendars. October the 17th, I believe that's a Friday night, because the next day, I believe, is the BYU football game down in Provo. So it could be a fun couple of days for you and get a first-hand look at the run in Utes as they will be in action against the Nevada Wolfpack. Big week this week. Utah volleyball gets back home. Two really good teams, especially the team coming in on Thursday night. Utah volleyball entertains Iowa State coming in on Thursday night. They are 10-1 on the season right now out of Ames, Iowa. A very good team. Then on Saturday afternoon, they'll entertain Colorado. So back-to-back home games at the Huntsman Center this week on Thursday and Saturday for Utah volleyball, who's coming off a weekend where they took 2 of 3 matches down at Cal Poly last weekend. They beat Cal Baptist and they beat St. Mary's, but got swept by Cal Poly. So they'll look to come back home and begin Big 12 play this weekend with the Cyclones and the Colorado Buffs. And then Utah Soccer's home this week as well. I'll have to call Wednesday night of the Cincinnati match, and then they'll play Saturday night against West Virginia. So the football team will be at West Virginia. The soccer team will be hosting West Virginia coming up. Those games also on ESPN Plus this week as Utah takes on Cincinnati and West Virginia in soccer. So that's where we're at. Then we'll have a bye week coming up for football. Next weekend will be a bye weekend, and then the Arizona State Sun Devils come in, and it starts a pretty good stretch for Utah. You have Arizona State at home and BYU back-to-back on the 11th and the 18th, and that's really a big swing weekend for Utah with the Sun Devils coming in, because they look like they've righted the ship a little bit after losing at Mississippi State a couple of weeks ago. Got a nice win last weekend against the Baylor Bears. So that's where we are with things. Just a reminder for you, the radio broadcast comes up on Saturday. Pregame at 9:30, and Scott Sly and I will join you from the booth in Morgantown at Milan Pushkar Stadium at 11:30, and then a 1:30 kickoff for the Utes and the Mountaineers of West Virginia. My big thanks to Tony Caridi, the voice of the Mountaineers, for taking a few minutes to join us on the program today to talk about this weekend's matchup. I've got a good feeling about this weekend. I think this Utah team's resilient. I think they kind of got punched in the mouth last weekend against Texas Tech, and I think they're going to rebound nicely this weekend against West Virginia on the road. And if you finish the first month of the season at 4-1, I think you feel pretty good about things if you're the University of Utah. I don't think anybody thought anybody in the Big 12 was going to go undefeated this year. And I still don't believe they will. Even as good as Texas Tech is, there's going to be a loss in there somewhere for the Red Raiders as well. So we'll see how it goes this weekend. But again, thank you to Tony Caridi. Thank you guys for tuning in. My big thanks to my producer, Nick Bowlerjack, for putting this thing together. And so for our entire crew here on the Crimson Corner, I'm Bill Riley saying I'll talk to you Saturday from Morgantown, West Virginia. Until then, go Utes.
You've been listening to the Crimson Corner podcast with Bill Riley. Bill is back next week with the latest on Utes. Download previous Crimson Corner episodes on all major podcast platforms.